We're going to talk about magnesium and selenium. Why in the world do we even care about these nutrients? And there's a big reason to care about them. And so I'm going to talk about them. And not only am I going to talk about them, but I'm going to talk about which ones do you use and why do we choose to use different supplements. Magnesium is tricky. And it can be very tricky because there are some forms of magnesium that are not absorbed very well and they give you diarrhea and they make you poop. And there are other forms of magnesium that are absorbed very well and have been shown to cross the blood-brain barrier, and so they have neurological benefits. So you kind of have to know a little bit about different forms of magnesium to try to boost the levels. And then we're going to also talk about what type of lab or level would you draw to optimize your magnesium levels. I'm always going to start with this slide because people will say, why doesn't my brain work? And I always say, well, there might be a handful of triggers. What are those triggers? And there's a lot of triggers. This slide's overwhelming. It gets less overwhelming the more you listen to me rant about cognitive health. But today I'm going to stay focused just on this category up here where you see the flashing red. And it's because I'm going to talk about some nutrients that are important for neurological health or for cognitive health. And the nutrient I'm going to talk the most about is magnesium today. And I'm going to talk just a little bit about selenium. I don't think selenium deserves an hour-long presentation. That doesn't minimize its benefits. Okay, when we have an insufficient amount of these nutrients, our brain doesn't function very well. Most people know that because they'll say, I think my B12 level is low because I feel tired. So people attribute B12 with fatigue. Well, magnesium is very important for a number of reasons, and I'm going to walk you through some of the research. About 5 years ago, I met this lady, and I met her because I paid for a telemedicine consult with her, like many of you have paid to have with me. Her name is Carolyn Dean. I believe she currently lives on the island of Hawaii, and she is one of the world's experts in magnesium. She's both a medical doctor who went through the pharmaceutical training route, traditional med school, and she's a naturopathic physician. So she's been through the 4 years of naturopathic school. She's a pretty stinking smart lady, and she's remarkable. She wrote I think the first book that she wrote is on your left. It's called The Magnesium Miracle. And she talks about, it's a little bit foggy because I had to make it bigger, but she talks about magnesium's ability to lower the risk of heart disease, help to prevent strokes, help people not be overweight, treat diabetes, and improve memory and mood. Oh, that's very convenient since I'm the brain guy and I want to talk about neurological health. And then she updated that book. She sold several 100,000 copies. The update on the right-hand side is a revised version of magnesium may be a missing link to our overall health. Now, while I think magnesium is important, I'm not naive enough to think that all of you on this call just need to start taking magnesium and all of your problems are going to go away. I don't believe that. But certainly it's a part of the process. And remember, our goal, if I go back to this slide, our goal is to say, how many of these problems do people struggle with? And let's assume that each one of these problems is like a hole in your roof. We got to start plugging holes so that our roof has integrity and our brain health gets better. Look at the bottom of that slide. This comes from her website, and I've referenced it. Magnesium is an essential nutrient and it's indispensable to your health and well-being. If you make sure that you add this nutrient to your diet, it helps guard against many threats like heart disease, stroke, osteoporosis, diabetes, depression, anxiety, asthma, and so forth. But this is the part in blue, despite magnesium's numerous benefits, many Americans are deficient in this nutrient. And she talks about what that means. I'm going to go over lab levels today so that you know how we look at magnesium levels, okay? We live in a world of AI, automated intelligence. And if I go to an AI engine and I type Tell me the physiological role of magnesium. It starts listing all of these out. And I'm going to read the first paragraph. Magnesium plays an incredibly broad and vital role in human physiology. Its impact is extensive and it affects numerous systems and processes in the body. And here's a summary. So it helps your enzymes function well. It's crucial for muscle contraction and nerve function, energy production, protein synthesis in the human body. If I go to the next page, it'll help you manage your blood sugars and blood pressure. It has benefits for bone health, DNA and RNA synthesis, and it helps the nervous system. And so the final statement is that because of its involvement in so many processes, magnesium deficiency can lead to a wide range of health problems. Now, someone on this call, I'm not going to identify who it is, but one of the participants in our message today recently said, Randy, my magnesium RBC level is low, and I've been taking magnesium. What form should I take? And we talked about the different forms. So this is supplemental to that conversation of what to try. I went in and really dug into the research. First of all, how do you know if you're deficient in magnesium? Well, there's several different tests. I'm going to go through about 4 of these tests. So the first test is called a serum magnesium level. It's the most common of the ways you can test magnesium. The problem, first bullet, is that it measures magnesium in the serum, but the problem with that is that most of the magnesium in your human body is in the tissues or in the cells. So I can draw your blood out of your vein and look at your serum magnesium level, but that would be different than if I took a biopsy of your thigh and looked at the magnesium level in the tissues. Obviously, no one in this call wants to get a biopsy to see what the tissue of their magnesium tissue level is. Serum magnesium on the second bullet only represents a small percentage of your total body magnesium. So if we just look at that test, we miss the potential deficiency that's happening at the tissue level. Okay? But this particular test is good for detecting the most severe deficiencies, like a heart attack or preterm labor. But it's not good at detecting chronic or subacute, subclinical deficiencies. Let me give you an example of this. Men, if you went to the hospital because you were having chest pain, they would instantly draw a serum magnesium level. And in a large number of cases during an episode of a heart attack, magnesium is low. And so they connect you to an IV and give you magnesium, and it relaxes the heart. It settles the heart down. Some of the women on our call today may have entered preterm labor where they started having contractions at 30 weeks or 32 weeks, and they didn't want to have their baby prematurely, and so they go to the hospital. One of the interventions that we do in the hospital every week, every day, is we hook women up to a magnesium infusion in the hospital, and it relaxes the uterus, so it calms down contractions. It's a very calming nutrient. Those are the instances where a serum magnesium level is often drawn and it's deficient. But again, those are severe acute cases. And so this form of a magnesium check is a good way of looking at severe deficiencies, but often misses kind of the subclinical deficiencies in magnesium. Okay. The next one that we could check is called a magnesium RBC. This is the form of magnesium that I check in the enhanced protocol. So I put it in blue. This measures the amount of magnesium that is attached or that is saturating your red blood cells. It is more sensitive than serum magnesium and likely a better indicator of a better reflective of the magnesium level in your tissues rather than just looking at the serum. and it's considered a more accurate test than serum magnesium. That's why I use this level, okay? But is it the very best? It may not be the very best test, but maybe it's the best test for the money. Remember, you can always get better, you can always get fancier, but you just have to pay more for it. So one of my goals is to try to get a good reflective sample of magnesium without spending a truckload of money, right? Because the cost of labs gets more and more expensive over time. So the next one I want to talk about is an ionized magnesium level. This is another lab test that we could do at LabCorp at your local hospital, and it measures biologically active magnesium. Now we're getting kind of technical. Magnesium can be biologically active or it can be bound to something. When it's bound, it's not as active. So this test is considered the most accurate reflection of the total magnesium in your body that is being active, that's being utilized. But it's less commonly available. Not everyone does it, and it's more expensive. That's why I don't do it, right? I'm trying to get a good representative level. It may not be the most accurate, but my gosh, we can't spend hundreds of dollars just looking at one nutrient level. When would we do this test? Well, in an intensive care unit in a hospital when someone's life is teetering and they're on a ventilator and they're very, very sick and in heart disease and so forth, sometimes we do an ionized magnesium level. So it's usually reserved for looking, because of the cost and the inconvenience of the test, we're looking at ICU patients, patients with sepsis, patients with persistent cardiac arrhythmias, severe electrolyte imbalances, or advanced kidneys disease. Okay? And there's one more way. There's probably actually more than this, but I just took some of the more common. There's a whole blood magnesium level, and this is a combination of a serum magnesium and a magnesium RBC. So when you do this, you're kind of paying for two tests. You get the combination. And it's considered a better indicator of magnesium status than serum magnesium or a magnesium RBC, because you're actually getting both at the same time. So you're saying how much is floating around the bloodstream and how much is predictive to be at the tissue level. So this is the combination of the two tests that I introduced at the very beginning. Again, it's just a little bit more expensive. Okay? That feels technical. If you don't practice medicine every day and you think, I didn't understand anything you said, let me just tell you how to remember this. Think of it like this. There's a lot of ways to check magnesium, and my goal within the enhanced protocol is to find a method that is the most reflective of your total body magnesium level and doesn't break the bank to do it. That's why I do magnesium RBC. It's cost effective, right? It costs about $35 or $40 at the lab to do that. Finally, we could look at a urine magnesium level, but that's only reflective of what your kidneys are excreting when you go pee. So again, that's not necessarily what I'm looking for with the enhanced protocol. All right. I want to talk about what a normal level is versus an optimal level. And I started my master class today talking about Dr. Carolyn Dean. She is a magnesium phenom. She's focused on it, and she will never settle for what a lab says is normal, ever. She will only settle on what is considered optimal, and it's the high end. Let me show you a little bit how to predict that. Most labs will say a normal level is between 4.2 and 6.8. And I'm talking about a magnesium RBC. Now, isn't it interesting, on this lab that I showed you, their range of normal is bigger. They're saying a normal range goes from 3.7 to 7.0. So they're saying a normal is a bigger range. When you look at other labs, they say it's a more narrow range. That shows you can't always trust what the lab is just flagging as normal. The lab is just showing what all the population is. And remember, most of the people getting labs are sick. So why do we want to know what the normal level is for sick people? We need to focus on the optimal level. So I always teach people how to do quick Randy Vawdrey math. I'm going to teach you how that works, okay? Over here on your right-hand side of your screen, you see the reference range for the lab is 3.7 to 7.0. If you add those two together, the total amount is 10.7, okay? If you take 10.7 and then you divide it by 2, the 50th percentile would be about 5, okay? 5.2, 5.3. So I list the optimal range has to be at least above the 50th percentile. And in my roadmap, I say the optimal level is 5.2. And when I say optimal, it's because you're at least going to be above the 50th percentile for magnesium. Dr. Carolyn Dean would furrow her brow at me and she would say, Randy, that's not optimal. That's still too low. That level should be greater than 6, or that level should be 6.5. And why would we choose to make sure we should put it up? Let me put some clinical conditions, because who cares if we're chasing labs? What about clinical conditions? What if you're one that's constantly struggling with muscle cramps, or you have tremors, or you have numbness and tingling? If you said to me, Randy, I got a lot of peripheral neuropathy and my feet feel numb and they're kind of agitated, I don't sleep good because of it, or you have muscle weakness, right? Along with that muscle cramping. If you're one that says, I have a lot of cardiac problems, sometimes I have arrhythmia, or I have AFib, atrial fibrillation. Sometimes people have seizure disorders. They've had a history of seizures. Then in every one of those instances, I would want to drive that magnesium level higher. I want it to be on the higher end than just the 50th percentile. Maybe we would want that to be in the 75th percentile. Okay? Hope that makes sense to all of you. So the next thing is, well, what form of magnesium should I use? I have the evil mini-me here, right? What form of magnesium? Because if you guys go on Amazon or Full Scripts, or you go to your health food store, you're going to see a million different forms of magnesium. And what I'm going to do is talk about each form in detail. And then at the very end, I'm going to give you a cheat sheet so that you can say, okay, I want to pay attention. Here's my challenge. Here's what I'm going to take. So the first one is a form of magnesium called mag citrate. Okay. Now, magnesium citrate, let me tell you just kind of a dumb story. I've worked urgent care for many years of my life. I owned urgent cares, and people would come in and they'd be terribly constipated and they couldn't poop. So I would send them down to the grocery store, and in the pharmacy section of every grocery store, they could buy a little can of soda pop in the laxative section, and it's called magnesium citrate. It comes in a little bottle. It's like a little mini bottle of soda pop. It seems like it's carbonated because it's under pressure. It's usually clear, or it's been colored orange or whatever. They give it a little bit of a fruity taste, but it tastes really salty. And if you drink that down, you're going to get diarrhea. And so people who are constipated, I would say, take a little magnesium citrate, go buy a bottle. Why? Because mag citrate has an osmotic laxative effect to it. Osmotic laxative means that when that magnesium, it's not absorbed great in the body, it stays in the bowel. And when it stays in the bowel, it pulls water from your tissues into the colon so that you can have a bowel movement a little bit better. It draws water into the bowel. So the primary purpose of this form of magnesium is to try to relieve constipation. And in some cases, we give it in a capsule form. It doesn't always come in a liquid. You can get mag citrate in a liquid like I just talked about, or you can get it in a capsule or a tablet, and it helps to optimize digestion. Okay? When you drink it really quick in the laxative form, it's not absorbed well. The calcium is absorbed a little, or excuse me, The magnesium capsule is absorbed a little bit better, and it can help with some of those digestive issues. Other potential benefits is muscle cramping. People say they sleep better with it, and it helps to calm a little bit of anxiety. What's the potential risk? The higher the dose of this form of magnesium called mag citrate is it has a laxative effect. So too much of it is going to give you the runs. FYI, beware. Look at all of the forms of magnesium citrate that you can get on the market. People will say, well, what's the best form, the best brand? Honestly, I don't know. I don't have any allegiance to this form of magnesium or brand. I have patients who've taken one called Calm, and that's a powder that you mix. It's a magnesium citrate powder, and it's called Calm because they say, well, it'll calm your anxiety and it'll just help you poop. There's magnesium citrate from Life Extension and Pure Encapsulations. Bulletproof has one version, and there's another brand on there. So I just am letting you know that each of these different brands are this form of magnesium, mag citrate. Okay, let's go on to the next one. Let me show you the next slide. The next slide is a magnesium form called magnesium glycinate. Magnesium glycine is an amino acid. Magnesium is a metal. It's called a nutrient metal. Sometimes nutrient metals are not absorbed very well. So one way we make them more absorbable in the body is we attach them to an amino acid. And the body will absorb the amino acid and carry that magnesium into our system. So this form of magnesium is very easily absorbed. And it's generally one that promotes relaxation. It can help reduce anxiety, help people sleep better, and there's some estimates that it can help to even reduce chronic pain. Why? Well, when people get in chronic pain, they get tense, they tighten up, their muscles get really tense. So if we can give you a supplement that just settles and calms the body, then we likely would have less pain. This form of magnesium is highly absorbable. It's better absorbed than the previous that I just showed you, magnesium citrate, and it's much less likely to cause diarrhea or some of those digestive challenges. Okay? Other potential benefits, I just talked about that. Muscle tension, stress, migraine. Some people take this form of magnesium because they notice they have less migraine. Why? Part of migraines can be tension of the muscles of the neck. The older I get and the more I practice medicine, the more I think that migraines are related to a lot of muscle tension in the head and in the neck. So those individuals could benefit from a little bit of magnesium glycinate or a lot of magnesium glycinate if they wanted to try that. Now, one potential risk is it could have a laxative effect if you're using really, really high doses. In my experience, I have not seen that to be the case, but that's what the literature says, okay? And there's lots of forms of this type of magnesium. So if you look at each one of those down below, there's magnesium glycinate from Life Extension, a brand called Now. Calm, I just showed you that same exact supplement as a mag citrate. They also have a magnesium glycinate version. Now you know why it gets so confusing, because one brand, it looks exactly the same, but they're different formulations of magnesium. Solaray also has a version, right? So this is one, because it's pretty absorbable, it's one that I often will recommend when clients' magnesium levels are lower than we want them, but it's also not the one I recommend on my roadmaps. And you might think, well, why not? I'll get there. I'm going to talk about magnesium threonate here in just a minute, okay? The next one I want to talk about is magnesium oxide. If you look down on the bottom left of your screen, this is a magnesium molecule bound together with an oxygen molecule. Well, that's kind of cool. You would think, well, that's really helpful. I want more oxygen in my body. I'm going to take magnesium oxide. But this form of magnesium is also known as milk of magnesia, right? You've probably all heard of that. All the seniors on our call know exactly what I'm talking about when I say milk of magnesia. It helps you poop, right? So again, we're back to a form of magnesium that tends to not be absorbed very well and go through the bowel. Its primary purpose is used as a laxative or to calm heartburn. It has a low absorption rate compared to other forms of magnesium, thus the loose stools, okay? Be aware, it might be less effective at raising your overall magnesium level. So if your mag RBC level is low and we're trying to increase it, we probably wouldn't use this form of magnesium because you're not going to absorb it very good. But who would benefit? Well, those that have difficulty pooping, right? This would be a form that you could use. Now, what if you're chronically constipated? Do we want to just have you take milk of magnesia every day? Probably not. Could we get you to a point that you're having more regular bowel movements and we tone that dose down and then shift into something else to help support bowel movements? You bet. So this could be the trigger, but not necessarily the long-term treatment, if you will, for magnesium absorption. And there's lots of forms. Probably the most common you'll see that Phillips. People are familiar with the creamy white milk, milk of magnesia. There's magnesium oxide from Sports Research. I like that supplement brand. There's other forms as well. Okay. Now, something to pay attention to. I actually put the label down here. This is 1,200 milligrams of elemental magnesium. Magnesium dosing is all across the chart. Some will say magnesium glycinate 100 milligrams or 400 or 500. I have intentionally stayed away from telling you the doses of what you should get because it depends on what the brand is. It depends on the formulary. It's not consistent from company to company. So it's really not effective for me to say get this dose range because it depends on the form that you're getting and who's producing it. Okay. The next one I want to talk about is called magnesium malate. This is elemental magnesium combined with malic acid. Now, malic acid plays a role in the Krebs cycle. For those of you who have heard the term Krebs cycle but may be less familiar with what it is, this is the cycle in the body that allows us to make ATP. ATP is an energy source. So there's some discussion about using this form of magnesium when people are chronically fatigued. Maybe it would make a difference, right? Now, chronic fatigue is a very complex condition that usually isn't just one thing, but maybe this would be a form of magnesium we would try in people who have cognitive fatigue, okay? The primary purpose of this form of magnesium, again, goes back to pain management and fatigue. I've read some research that if someone has fibromyalgia, kind of that chronic fatigue, I can't get my motor running, I just am exhausted and I'm brain foggy all day long, maybe they would reach for some magnesium malate as their starting point. It is absorbed pretty well in the gut and it's gentle on the stomach. So it's likely not going to induce diarrhea like mag oxide or magnesium citrate, a little bit easier, although in high doses you could get there. And the potential benefit is it helps to produce energy. Energy, we talk about energy in medicine as ATP. I recently gave a lecture for a large continuing education company for naturopaths and functional medicine doctors. It's called the Karazian Institute. And that lecture series launched on March 22nd. And as soon as it launched, I got a flurry of email during spring break from practitioners who saw my continuing ed and reached out to me and either said, hey, thanks, that was helpful, or congratulations, blah, blah, blah. One of them reached out to me and said, Randy, loved what I learned from your lecture, but I want to focus on ATP. How do I help my patients with dementia have more energy? And his whole question was on this topic of ATP production. It's a complex topic because there isn't just one thing that you do. There's a million things that we do. In this case, magnesium would play a role in that. And there are drug companies that suggest this form of magnesium may be more effective, right? Again, that's opinion probably more than research based. There are lots of forms of this supplement on the market, and I've listed some of those forms in this summary right here, but you would actually look for a label that's called magnesium malate. And it's just because, let me tell you, this isn't that there's oodles and oodles of research saying, oh my gosh, this is going to change the Krebs cycle so people can make more ATP. It's because part of the Krebs cycle is dependent on the functioning of malic acid. So if you take a magnesium supplement that has malic acid in it, you give your body the building blocks to be able to function through that cycle, perhaps with a little bit more efficiency. Okay. Magnesium chloride. Let me tell you about this one. This is considered an inorganic form of magnesium, whereas like some of the magnesiums that are attached to an amino acid would be considered a more organic form. This form is more soluble in water. Remember, magnesium is considered a nutrient metal, and nutrient metals do not dissolve real easily in water. So this is highly absorbable. It's kind of inorganic in nature, and it's helped to promote muscle relaxation. Now, the interesting thing about this form of magnesium is it's usually not oral in nature. We don't have you take this orally, it would give you diarrhea. But we put it in sprays and in topicals. And I have to admit, I've not used a ton of these, but I have a couple of patients who have said, wow, I get muscle tension and muscle soreness, and that makes a difference. It's a spray or a rub on, kind of like Bengay, where you would rub it into a tight muscle, and then when it absorbs into the tissue because it's water soluble. Excuse me, I had to cough. Let me take a quick drink here. So this form you spray on a muscle or you rub it into a muscle, and it has a local effect, not a systemic effect, but a localized effect on that muscle tissue. So it's highly absorbable through the skin. And although it can be taken orally, it's more likely to probably cause a little bit of diarrhea if you take too much of it. And I went on a couple of websites and looked at these topical versions. So you'll see they come in a little pump spray or a little bit of a roll-on, kind of like the old roll-on deodorants that you could use, or a little cream like a suntan lotion that, or a sunblock that you put on your hand and rub it into your skin. Pretty fascinating about that. You could probably squirt this in your mouth and it's a low enough dose it wouldn't give you diarrhea, but these don't taste amazing, right? This ionic form has a real salty, metallic-y taste to them, FYI. But I'm not promoting this form of magnesium for oral use. I'm promoting it for topical use, okay? And because I have not used a lot of these, while I was preparing my research, I purchased one, had it shipped to my house so that I can experience this and apply it when I'm working with people who might have a sore neck or a sore leg, and we're trying to get that muscle to relax. All right, let's do the next one. Magnesium threonate. Now, interestingly enough, this is the one that is the default recommendation on my roadmap. Okay, and you might say, oh, this is Randy's favorite. I wouldn't necessarily say my favorite, but it's on my roadmap specifically because there are clinical studies that show this form of magnesium crosses into the blood-brain barrier and gets actually into your brain, and there are some studies that show it can enhance cognitive functioning. Okay, so if your magnesium RBC level was low, and I gave you a recommendation to start magnesium, this is the form that I recommended for that reason. It's very highly absorbable, and we know that it crosses the blood-brain barrier. And when Carolyn Dean talks about, well, it can then improve memory and focus and mental clarity, this is the form that I start with. Now, have I used other forms? You bet I have. Have I made recommendations for other forms because of the absorbability? You bet I have, okay? So here's a copy of an article printed in 2010 that says, it's kind of a play on words. Remember magnesium if you want to remember, right? Because this is going to cross the blood-brain barrier. It's a synthetic form of a supplement that helps to improve memory and may stave off some memory loss. And Life Extension has named this Neuromag. Sometimes it's called Magtine, and it's the magnesium L-threonate, right? So that's the form that comes in the roadmap. Again, my goal was to kind of broaden it today, but that's why when you say, well, Randy, in your roadmap, you said mag-threonate, that's the reason why. There's another form of magnesium that seems to have some literature specifically about the heart. So if people had atrial fib or cardiovascular disease, some of the recommendations are that they take a form of magnesium called magtaurine, right? And taurine, again, is another amino acid. And there's literature about taurine and cognitive health too. So I think this could dual. This could also work in the form of for neurological health and cardiovascular health. But the general recommendation is this form of magnesium is recommended as a treatment for heart disease because of its benefits of relaxing smooth muscle. And the heart is all smooth muscle, right? It's smooth muscle is defined as is the form of muscle that you can't control. You can't manually contract your heart. It just happens automatically. It's innervated by the nervous system, the parasympathetic nervous system, so that it just beats on its own. But it can help relax blood vessels and calm blood vessels so that your blood pressure goes down. Because I practice a lot of natural medicine in addition to my pharmaceutical medicine, I have clients that come to me and say, Randy, always recommend natural before you recommend pharmaceutical. Okay. And I say, all right. So someone comes in with blood pressure problems. They don't want me to prescribe blood pressure medicine up front. They would rather try a natural approach. So for those people, for blood pressure, I might use hawthorn berry or feverfew or ginkgo biloba or vinpocetine. Those are natural supplements for the heart. And I could add to that this form of magnesium, magtaurine, or magtartrate, or excuse me, taurate as a form for cardiovascular health. It's moderately absorbed, not amazing, right? And there's lots of different forms of magtaurate. So what I've tried to do is, as I've talked about these, I'm showing you different labels and different supplements so that you can say, okay, Randy talked about this. I want to go find that particular supplement. Now, I'm going to get to my cheat sheet here in just a second because I've summarized all this in a one slide summary. And if you want to take a picture of it, it'll make it easier for you to remember what I've talked about today. The next one is I want to talk about magnesium sulfate. Most of you are familiar with this, but you're familiar under a different name. It's called Epsom salts. Okay. Did you know that Epsom salts are just a form of magnesium sulfate? Isn't that interesting? The primary purpose is this is also absorbed through the skin, and it helps to soothe sore muscles and helps to lower inflammation. So most of you are familiar with this because of two ways. Number one, you can put a bunch of Epsom salts in your bathtub and you can soak in your bath and it will calm irritated muscles. Like if you do a hard workout, you take a nice bath with magnesium, with Epsom salts, it'll make a difference because it's absorbed through the skin. But you could also put a teaspoon of Epsom salts in water and drink it down. It would feel salty. It does not taste good at all. I'm telling you, it tastes terrible, but it will induce diarrhea. It's a laxative in nature. So it's safe, but it doesn't taste very good. I don't know if any of you have seen Dr. Till's pure Epsom salts in the grocery stores. He's kind of become famous for linking Epsom salts with essential oils. So you can get one that has lavender, or you can get one that has wintergreen or peppermint or lemon balm. And he uses this preparation is designed to try to help induce relaxation because we know that lavender is very calming as well. So you could take an Epsom salt bath with lavender and you might sleep a little bit better. I am a huge fan of this. In my bathroom, I have a cupboard loaded with Epsom salts. And especially in the wintertime, when I'm trying to calm down because life is busy and stressful, and teenagers and coaching soccer and dance lessons and so forth, I'll just go fill the bathtub up, put 2 full cups of Epsom salts, and just soak for a little bit and listen to some music. I sleep like a baby. I totally love this form of magnesium, but it's not oral for me. It's always absorbed through the skin, kind of topical. Okay. All right. So, which magnesium form should I use? Here's your cheat sheet. I've seen some of you take out your little cameras and you want to take pictures, and so you can say, I want to remember this part of Randy's lecture. This is a great opportunity to look at this form of magnesium. Okay. So, if you have anxiety or sleep issues, magnesium glycinate would be a starting point. If you have digestion or constipation issues, you might consider magnesium citrate or magnesium oxide. If you have muscle pain or fibromyalgia, you might use magnesium malate. If you're focused on brain health, it would be magnesium threonate. Heart health is magnesium taurate. And for topical use, we would either use Epsom salts or magnesium chloride. Okay. Now, what if you're like me and you say, hey, I got a stiff neck and muscle pain. I have a lot of anxiety. I'm not sleeping well, and I haven't pooped for a week. I got all of these challenges. Well, if you have all of these challenges, you could mix and match. You could say, okay, I'm going to take one of these, one of these, and one of these. I get that that's complex because now you're buying 3 forms of magnesium. Now your pocketbook budget just went up because you're, instead of spending $20 on a supplement, you're spending $60 getting 3 different kinds. It's complex, I know. So what I would recommend that you do is you could experiment with some of these forms of magnesium. You can get a bottle, and they're all very conservative. You get a bottle of magnesium and it might say take 1 a day. You could take 2 in the morning and 2 at night and see what you notice. It's not dangerous. Carolyn Dean talked about in her book, magnesium is very safe. And if you get too much, you'll just get diarrhea. You'll get the runs. So it's not like you're ever going to get a toxic amount. You can't absorb a toxic amount. You take too much, your body's going to poop it out. So that's how you know you may have gotten a little too much. So just be aware of that, that there's opportunities for different forms of magnesium for different reasons. Okay. All right. So I'm going to switch gears for just a second and cover a second nutrient metal. Remember, we talk about nutrient metals. Nutrient metals would be things like, did you know that calcium is a nutrient metal? Magnesium is a nutrient metal, selenium, manganese, boron, there's a whole bunch of them. I actually test for magnesium in your roadmaps. When you get labs from me, I'm going to look at your selenium level. Selenium is a nutrient metal that you could get toxic on. This is one you want to be in the sweet spot. You don't want to be too high and you don't want to be too low. It's a trace mineral, meaning we don't need huge amounts. Instead of talking about it in milligrams, we often talk about it in micrograms, right? So lower amounts. The body requires it in small amounts for proper functioning. And just like magnesium, it plays a role in a lot of physiological processes. And I'm going to go through some of these with you. Selenium, by almost all medical accounts, is considered an antioxidant. So most of you on our call today are familiar with antioxidants like CoQ10, or you've heard of resveratrol or glutathione. Selenium is a form of an antioxidant, and it helps to protect our cells against free radical damage when we have chronic disease. Selenium is essential for the functioning of the thyroid. So it's vital. Your thyroid doesn't work very well when selenium levels get too low. Okay, so this is one we check, we follow. It helps to support your immune system. Remember during COVID when everyone says, oh, if you want to protect your immune system, take vitamin D. It's just one of the vitamins that helps to support immune function. There are others, and selenium is one of those. It's important for reproductive health. So, all of you on this call who want to have a baby in 9 months, maybe you should add a little selenium. Wink, wink. I better not hear any pregnancy stories coming up here. I'd worry about you. Okay. The next one is DNA synthesis. It helps to promote the production of DNA in our body. And why do we need that? We have to repair DNA. When we break a protein down, we have to rebuild it. That requires DNA to do that. Many of you would say, well, what are the best dietary sources of selenium? Selenium can be found in Brazil nuts. I think it's really the highest dose of natural selenium we get are in Brazil nuts. And if I took a poll and asked how many of you eat Brazil nuts every day, I bet it would be few, unless you like mixed nuts, and there's some Brazil nuts in mixed nuts. It's found in coconut, tuna, eggs. That's a great source of selenium. White beans and Brussels sprouts. My gosh, if you knew how much I loved Brussels sprouts. I love them. I love sauteed Brussels sprouts with onion, cauliflower. Oh my gosh, we do it at our house a lot. It's just a fantastic form of selenium. Okay. I actually didn't change this picture out. I should have showed you a selenium form. A normal level is between 70 and 150, and an optimal range is smack dab in the middle at 125. Remember, I take the 50th percentile, and when I take the 50th percentile, that would be an optimal range of 125 micrograms of selenium when we do your blood work. And speaking very generally, you don't want to have huge amounts of selenium in your body. You just want to be in the optimal range. I just finished telling you that in magnesium, we don't think there's a toxic level. You can't get too much of it because when you take it, you'll just get diarrhea. Selenium isn't like that. You could take lots of selenium, not get diarrhea, and potentially that level gets out of control and it becomes a problem. So why would you choose to optimize your selenium level? Well, individuals who have thyroid problems would take selenium. People who have infertility issues might consider selenium. A weakened immune system. What if you get sick all the time? Every time the flu bug runs through town, you bottom out and the rest of your family's fine. Okay. Hair loss. I've seen a little bit of research about hair loss, cognitive disorders, and changes in your nails. One of the more difficult challenges that I deal with in my family medicine practice is women that come in and say, my hair is thinning. What can I do to get for hair thinning? And that is a complex thing too, because there's no one test. Oh, do this test, and that's why you have thinning hair. We don't know that. But oftentimes selenium is in many of the hair supplements that people take to try to strengthen their hair because it plays a role in that. My favorite form of selenium is this supplement. So I just told you I don't necessarily endorse just one supplement company, but this is one I have recommended now for probably 10 years. I have used this supplement. It's called Clearway Cofactors. And this particular supplement, if you'll see right up here, it has selenium at 200 micrograms. Remember, when we were talking about magnesium, we were talking in milligrams. In this form, we're talking micrograms, okay? And the reason I like this is that supplement is combined with a bunch of other nutrients. One's called Bacopa monnieri. If you were to research Bacopa monnieri, you would see this is used in people who have cognitive problems. I love Bacopa. It's fantastic. It has nattokinase and pine. It has some flavonoids like pomegranate and quercetin, and then it has something called lipoic acid. I love lipoic acid. We use that in our diabetics. So one of the reasons I like this supplement, when someone's selenium's down, I can give them this supplement and it supports all of the other things that we talk about in the enhanced protocol. Nootropics for neurological health, flavonoids, and so forth. Okay. There's other forms of it. Dr. Mercola has a selenium combined with zinc. That's fine, right? I've already told you what my favorite is. Pure Encapsulations also has a formula. So I've rambled on long enough. I want to stop for a minute and take some questions.